Imagine towering structures, monuments to forgotten civilizations, their secrets buried beneath tons of sand and time. These are the ancient pyramids, enigmatic testaments to a bygone era. But what if their secrets went beyond mere tombs and pharaohs? What if recent discoveries within these pyramids unearthed something far more unsettling, something that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned archaeologists? From the intricate pyramid texts guiding the pharaoh's soul through the afterlife, to the meticulous burial practices within pyramids, to animal mummies, each find on our list promises to leave you baffled. So buckle up and get ready to see the 10 mind-blowing ancient pyramid discoveries that scared archaeologists, because the #1 spot on our countdown promises to blow your mind. Number 10. A timeless treasure sailing through the ages. Khufu's solar boat is one of the most amazing things that has been found inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. This amazing item, which is more than 4,500 years old, was discovered in a pit next to the King Khufu's tomb, inside the huge rock structure of the pyramid. When the famous Egyptian researcher Kamal el-Malak found the boat in 1954, it was a turning point in the study of how ancient Egyptians buried their dead. The Egyptians were very creative and skilled, and the boat itself is proof of that. The boat was carefully taken apart into more than 1,200 separate pieces made from Lebanese cedar wood. It took a team of researchers several years of hard work and help from experts to put the boat back together again. The boat is stylish and seaworthy, with a straight body and beautiful carvings all over its surface. It is about 143 feet long. Scholars are still arguing about what Khufu's solar boat was used for, but the most popular ideas say it had a symbolic and religious meaning. It is commonly thought that Khufu built the boat to serve him in the future and help his soul travel through the heavenly worlds. In Egyptian legend, the sun god Ra traveled through the sky on a solar bark, which stood for the circle of life, death, and return. So, Khufu's solar boat may have been ritually linked to this trip through the sky, making it easier for the pharaoh to reach the world of the gods. The fact that the boat was buried next to Khufu's pyramid also suggests a link to the king's tomb and funeral ceremonies. Some researchers think that the boat may have been used in Khufu's funeral processions to bring his body to the pyramid to be buried. It could also have been used in religious events to honor the dead king, acting as a link between the world of humans and the world of gods. Khufu's solar boat is important for more reasons than just being a historical find. It shows us a lot about ancient Egyptian ideas, technology, and sailing skills. Its finding was a big step forward for modern history. It solved the riddles of one of the world's most famous landmarks and helped us learn more about the past. Khufu's solar boat is a physical link to Egypt's long and interesting past. It continues to amaze and astound us, telling us of the lasting impact of this old culture. Number 9. When art meets history in the depths of pyramids. The hieroglyphs and paintings found inside different Egyptian tombs show some of the most important and interesting things about Egyptian culture and ideas. It is very helpful to learn about the ancient Egyptians' religious practices, customs, and daily life from these very detailed writings and pictures. The carefully carved or painted Egyptian writing on the walls of pyramid passageways and rooms tells us what the pharaohs believed, what they had accomplished, and what they wanted to achieve in the future. These hieroglyphs are used for a lot of different things, like religious books, history stories, and government records. They often carry prayers, songs, and magic that are meant to help the pharaoh's soul find its way in the afterlife and protect it from harm. Along with ancient writing, the walls of the pyramid are covered with bright drawings that bring mythological stories, religious events, and the everyday to life. The artists who made these works were very skilled and paid attention to every detail. They show gods, goddesses, and mythical animals performing religious rites and fighting in the cosmos. In addition to scenes of farming, hunting, and everyday life in Egypt, these paintings show important aspects of the society's economy and social structure. The paintings' placing and meanings inside the pyramid rooms are also carefully planned to match the pharaoh's trip through the afterlife. For instance, pictures of the pharaoh getting gifts from gods or taking part in funeral ceremonies are meant to ensure that the gods will bless and help them in the future. In the same way, pictures of the pharaohs triumphantly returning to the world of the living after conquering many trials represent their endless rebirth and rule as king. Number 8. Journeys beyond death. The burial rooms inside the ancient pyramids were seen as holy places that held great spiritual value in the funeral customs of those times, especially in Egypt. These rooms, which were usually deep inside the pyramids, were where pharaohs, queens, and other important people in Egyptian society were buried after they died. With careful attention to detail and a lot of spiritual meaning, these rooms were made to make sure that the dead could safely go to the next life. Archaeologists and travelers have seen scenes of great wealth and respect when they have gone into these grave rooms. The sarcophagus, a carefully made stone box that holds the dead, is often the most important thing in these rooms. The pharaoh's body and spirit were meant to be safe forever in these sarcophagi, which were often decorated with elaborate writings and pictures of gods and religious symbols. Within the rooms around the tomb, there are usually a lot of valuable items and gifts that are meant to help the dead person on their trip to the future. As gifts, people brought things like valuable stones, fancy jewelry, amulets made of gold, statuettes with detailed carvings, and weapons used in ceremonies. Food, drink, and other supplies were also put in the rooms to help the dead stay alive in the future. People thought that these gifts would ensure the continued happiness and health of the dead in the next world. There are also very detailed drawings and writings on the walls of these tombs that show scenes from the dead person's life, religious rites, and mythological stories. Not only did these works of art tell stories visually, they were also used as powerful spells and incantations to help protect and guide the souls of the dead as they traveled through the underworld. Number 7. Ancient Egyptian passports to paradise. One of the most important things found in the old tombs of Saqqara, Egypt, was the pyramid texts. They are some of the oldest religious books in the world, dating back to the Old Kingdom. They reveal a lot about the spiritual views and funeral customs of ancient Egyptians. These writings were carved into the walls of many pyramids, including those of kings like Unas, Teti, and Pepi I. They were very important for helping the pharaoh's soul find its way in the afterlife. The pyramid texts were made up of spells, songs, and practices that were meant to help the dead king or queen pass into the land of the gods. The books have complicated formulas and spells that were meant to keep the pharaoh's spirit safe from evil forces, help it find its way through the underworld, and eventually ensure endless life with the gods. One of the main ideas in the pyramid texts is that the dead king was a heavenly master who would one day join the gods in the future. It was thought that the pharaoh's soul went through a series of trials and changes through the complex rites and gifts described in the texts. Eventually, the pharaoh's soul met with the gods and became immortal. The pyramid texts also show how much the Egyptians respected the order of the universe and the processes of life and death. The texts are full of references to celestial things like the sun, moon, and stars. This shows how well the Egyptians understood astrology and how they believed that the spiritual and physical worlds were related. The pyramid texts also give us important information about the complicated ceremonies that were used to bury and honor the king. These texts describe a very carefully planned process that is meant to ensure the king's smooth entry into the afterlife. It includes cleaning the king's body, performing a ceremony to open his mouth, and giving gifts. Number 6. Mummy mazes and lost loot. People who are interested in history, archaeology, and pyramids all find the idea of hidden passageways and rooms within these huge buildings very interesting. These hidden areas were found in several mounds from different cultures. They are mysterious reminders of old beliefs and practices. Some parts have been studied and explored in great detail, but others are still mysterious and need to be looked into further. When it came to funeral rites, these hidden passages often had both symbolic and practical meanings. In a symbolic way, people thought that they made it easier for the dead king or prince to get to the future by connecting the world of the living and the world of the gods. The complex layout and arrangement of these tunnels showed the religious and philosophical views of the people who built them. For instance, the way pathways were set up in relation to celestial bodies may have been meant to lead the soul of the dead to certain stars or constellations that were linked to gods or the future. In real life, secret passageways and rooms were used for different tasks connected to the burying process. They let priests and mourners perform ceremonies and rites in honor of the dead in the inner rooms of the pyramid, which held the coffin and other grave goods. Additionally, these tunnels may have been used to carry gifts for the dead, like food, jewelry, and symbolic items that were meant to go with them to the next life. Protecting the tomb from theft and desecration was another reason these tunnels were carefully built and hidden. Some passages were designed with traps or obstacles to thwart intruders. These could include pitfalls, false doors, or even boulder traps intended to crush or block invaders. This shows how important it was to keep the grave spot holy and undisturbed. Even after hundreds of years of digging and exploring, many of the pyramid's secret tunnels and rooms are still unknown or only partly explored. New developments in archaeological methods, like ground-penetrating radar, LiDAR scans, and remote sensing technologies, make it possible to find these hard-to-find features without damaging the pyramid's delicate structures. Researchers and explorers are still looking into what these secret places are for and what they mean. This helps us learn more about old cultures and how they thought about death and the future. Number 5. A window to the afterlife. In the many pyramid complexes that were spread out across ancient Egypt, researchers have found strong evidence that helps them understand the complicated process of mummification. These findings tell us a lot about the views and practices of ancient Egyptians when it came to death and burial. The remains of mummification workshops, where skilled workers carefully prepared the dead for their trip to the future, are some of the most important things that have been found. Archaeologists have found a great trove of mummification materials in these workshops. These include different preserving chemicals, tools, and other things that were necessary to keep the dead alive. Natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture used to dry out the body, and woody substances like cedar oil or myrrh are often used to give the mummy a pleasant smell and help it stay preserved even longer. Along with these things are many carefully made tools used in the complicated process of mummification. There are embalming knives, hooks, and needles among these tools. Each one is used for a different task when organs are removed and the body is prepared for storage. Also, a lot of the linen bands that were used to wrap the preserved bodies have been found. This is more proof of how carefully the mummification process was done. Along with the materials and tools, researchers have found a lot of preserved human and animal bodies inside pyramid structures. The fact that these mummies are still there shows how important the Egyptians thought it was to keep the body alive so that the soul could use it in the future. Human mummies, which are often decorated with intricate funeral masks and amulets, are moving reminders of the people who lived in the past. Animal mummies, which include cats, dogs, birds, and even crocodiles, show the different religious beliefs and practices of ancient Egyptian society. By looking at these mummification materials, tools, and remains, researchers have put together a full picture of how the ancient Egyptians buried their dead. These findings show us the religious, cultural, and social life of one of the most long-lasting societies in history. For example, they show how carefully animal mummies were preserved and what they meant to the people who lived there. As more and more research is done to figure out what happened in the past, mummification studies are still very important to our understanding of human history. Number 4. Beyond the grave. One of the most interesting things about exploring old tombs is finding all the different items and gifts that were hidden inside them. Some of the things that have been found are pottery, jewelry, statues, and even food. All of these things were very important to ancient Egyptian beliefs and rituals. As historians carefully dig up grave rooms and the areas around them, they find artifacts that tell us a lot about the religion and culture of the time. Pottery pots with complicated designs are one of the most common things found in pyramid structures. These jars, which had detailed designs and meaningful patterns on them, were used for both everyday things and religious ceremonies. Offerings of food, drink, and other things thought to be important for the trip to the future were often put in them. The skill that went into making these dishes shows how important it was to make sure the dead were comfortable and fed in the afterlife. Jewelry is another common type of item that has been found in mound tombs. These decorations, which included everything from intricate chains and bands to carefully made amulets, were worn by the dead and were important in both this world and the next. People thought that amulets in particular had protection powers and could keep away bad spirits, making sure that the dead would make a safe journey to the next world. Many times, you can find statues of different sizes all over pyramid structures. The different figures were used for different things, like showing gods and goddesses or the dead. They were carefully carved, and people thought that they would be guards and friends for the dead in the future. Some images of the dead show them in a perfect state to show how important and high status they were in society. Food that was mummified and kept fresh or put in pyramid tombs as a gift is another common thing that is found there. These items included everyday things like bread and beer as well as fancier treats. The fact that food was offered shows that the ancient Egyptians believed in life after death and how important food was for the journey to the future. Number 3. Laser cutting in ancient times. The old pyramids are a great example of how smart and skilled people during those times were. Archaeologists and scholars have learned a lot about the engineering and building methods used in these sites by studying them carefully and analyzing them. One of the most amazing things about pyramid building is how precisely the stones were cut by the builders of long ago. Even though they didn't have modern tools, they were able to cut huge blocks of limestone and granite with amazing accuracy, often getting the stones almost perfectly lined up and the joints between them very tight. This accuracy shows that they have a deep knowledge of mathematics and skill, which has been developed over many generations of building innovation. This technique resembles modern laser cutting with its unparalleled precision and intricate designs and cuts with minimal margin for error. Also, the way these huge stones were moved and put in place is another amazing example of old engineering. There is evidence that ramp systems were used to move the big blocks from mines to building sites. These ramps, which could be made of mud brick, wood, or something else, gave workers the slope they needed to move the stones with sledges or rollers. The exact layout of these ramps is still being debated by experts, but the fact that they exist shows how much planning and organization is needed for such big projects. Also, the way the workers organized themselves while building the pyramid shows how old societies were structured with levels of authority. Stonemasons, builders, engineers, and other skilled workers directed the building process's many small details. Peasants, artists, and slaves worked as a huge labor force to dig, move, and put the buildings together. This splitting up of work and coordination of efforts across different fields shows how good ancient rulers were at managing things and getting a lot of resources to work together. In addition to these basic techniques, new archaeological finds have shed light on other aspects of pyramid building. For example, Water was used to grease sledges and reduce friction while they were being moved, and mud bricks and limestone mortar were used to hold stone blocks in place. Each new discovery helps us learn more about the complicated steps that went into making these lasting symbols of human progress. Number 2. Did ancient Egyptians map the stars on Earth? Astronomical patterns in old pyramids are an interesting example of how smart and creative people can be. Throughout history, different cultures have shown that they had a deep understanding of how the stars move and used that knowledge to create and build huge buildings that face the sky. The Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt is one of the most famous examples of this kind of astronomical accuracy. The Great Pyramid, which was built more than 4,500 years ago during the rule of Pharaoh Khufu, is a testament to the Egyptians' skill as builders and engineers. Aside from its huge size and perfect geometrical balance, the pyramid's direction has fascinated scientists and thinkers for hundreds of years. Researchers have found that the Great Pyramid's sides are almost perfectly lined up with the 4 points of the compass: north, south, east, and west. The exact alignment with the cardinal directions suggests that the makers made an effort to line up the pyramid with them, possibly for symbolic or practical reasons. But what really amazes experts is how the pyramid is aligned with some heavenly bodies. One of the most talked about ways that the Great Pyramid is aligned with the sky is in connection to the star Orion. There are some ideas that say the 3 main pyramids at Giza, including the Great Pyramid, are set up on the ground in a way that shows how the stars in Orion's belt looked in the sky around 2500 BC. Because of this symmetry, some people think that the ancient Egyptians may have meant for the pyramids to represent the sky on Earth, maybe to make the pharaoh's trip to the afterlife easier. Also, the Great Pyramid's north-south axis is very close to being in line with the true north, which shows that the builders had a deep knowledge of how the stars work. Some experts think that the stars were carefully watched or simple astronomy tools were used to make this pairing happen. Number 1. Gods in fur and feathers. Animal bodies found inside pyramid buildings give us a fascinating look into the religious and cultural beliefs and practices of the ancient Egyptians. Cats, dogs, birds, and even alligators are often preserved. This shows how diverse the wildlife is in the Nile Valley and how important animals were in Egyptian folklore and daily life. People didn't just keep these animals as pets or use them as farm animals. They respected them because they thought they had links to gods and meanings in the future. For example, cats were linked to the goddess Bastet, who stood for safety, fertility, and home life. A lot of mummified cats were often buried together, either as gifts to the goddess or as friends for the dead in the future. The jackal-headed god, Anubis, on the other hand, was linked to dogs. He was in charge of mummification and the afterlife. People thought that mummified dogs helped and protected souls on their dangerous journey to the dead. People worshipped birds, especially ibises and falcons, because they were linked to gods like Thoth and Horus. Ibises were linked to Thoth, the god of writing and knowledge, and falcons were linked to Horus, the god of the sky, and ruled with a falcon's head. Birds that had been mummified were often buried with human mummies as a sign of the soul's journey to heaven and change. The ancient Egyptians were both afraid of and revered crocodiles because they were the top hunters in the Nile. As a gift to the god Sobek, who stood for power, fertility, and security, preserved alligators were buried in temple buildings or put in holy pools to protect the river from its risks and make it fertile. These animal mummies were not just for fun or as part of a routine. They were an important part of Egyptian religion and mythology. In ancient Egyptian society, burying them served a number of religious, symbolic, and useful purposes. It showed how people, animals, and the divine were all linked. The ancient pyramids have captivated humanity for millennia, their silent presence a constant reminder of a lost civilization. These 10 ancient pyramid discoveries are the most amazing we have found so far, and we hope we can keep adding to the list in the future.